for being here tonight, sharing in Alchemist Theater. It is such a privilege and an honor to stand before you and with these amazing groups of individuals. I mean, it's really such a pleasure every month to be here. So, I'm going to share something with y'all. I had this speech written out. It was fabulous. And then I went and saw Bernie Sanders last night. And then followed that up with the movie Straight Outta Compton. And the juxtaposition of the two experiences gave me a vision from Spirita that my talk was not appropriate, was not the right talk, was not the talk I was meant to give tonight, so I scrapped it. Now, when I often find myself in this position of being in the void, a vessel for Spirita to speak through, and not really quite knowing what it is that I'm meant to talk about, I do something that most of us do. I did it last month, worked out real well. I turned to Google. Okay? And I typed into Google, Brave and inspirational quotes. And the first one that cropped up was a quote from one of my favorite books of all time, the Bhagavad Gita. Yes! And it says, if you want to see the brave, look to those who can forgive. If you want to see the heroic, look to those who can love in return for hatred. And the second I read that, I was like, oh, thank you, Spirit. That is what I'm going to talk about. So somehow, this preaching, moo-moo wearing, talking stick holding, ginger is gonna tie in Bernie Sanders, the Bhagavad Gita, Straight Outta Compton, and improv into one talk. Are y'all ready? Now, just like Jess said, and what a lovely talk. Let's give her a round of applause. To be backstage and get to listen to the talks and the songs and hopefully tie a little bit of a bow on all these different variations and different interpretations of what brave means to us. So I really truly believe that the change begins within self. So I'm going to talk a little about the personal, the micro level, and then take that out and talk about brave on a macro level. So when I thought about the words, those who are brave are those that can forgive, I immediately thought about myself. Natural reflex. And I thought about, when we hear the word brave, we often think about external forces. We often think about being brave and charging against the fears in the dark that exist beyond ourselves, when in fact, I immediately turned within and I thought, well, the darkness can be most prevalent within ourselves. The strongest blows and jabs to who we are can come within the chattering monkey mind of self. And really, nobody can hurt you more in this world than yourself. And I thought about the times in my life where I have not forgiven myself and how difficult it is to forgive yourself for the things that you do, the trespasses against yourself and others, and how difficult it is to release that energy and to forgive. And I thought about how often do we go through our lives holding on to this impression of ourselves that we are bad, instead of letting that go and allowing space for healing and forgiveness and ultimately love. Can you love in return for the hatred, specifically when you've given that hatred to yourself? So last year, I don't know if all y'all know, but I am part of the Utility Players, Reno's #1 improv comedy crew. We were in San Francisco for an improv festival, and we were in this workshop, and the facilitator led us through this activity, and it was called I Failed. And the activity went as thus. In improv, there are certain rules that you need to abide by in order to create and further the scene and keep the progression of what is happening moving forward. There's things that you can do that can halt the energy, that can bring about an end or a death to the scene. And sometimes when we make poor choices, we as improvisers, because we're like thinking off the top of our heads, sometimes we make incorrect choices and we can get really down on ourselves and come into this space of self-deprecation that's really hard to take yourself out of. And because, you know, we're all entertainers and have fragile egos and are completely self-conscious, the facilitator thought it was important to do this activity where if you did something, you froze during a scene, or perhaps you blocked somebody, or did anything, you could immediately negate and diffuse the energy by just saying, I failed! And everybody in the workshop clapped and cheered for you. And I almost cried. It was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life because I'd never been in a situation where I was encouraged to admit my failures in front of other people, let alone myself. And then instead of being in a space where I would feel bad about my failures or be like, oh my gosh, like, are they totally judging me? Like, oh my God, he's giving me weird shade right now. You were encouraged to support your fellow improviser by clapping and cheering because it takes such courage to admit the fact that you failed. And then you can let it go. You can move on. You didn't have to hold on to it and become this broken record of your life. So, what I want you to do right now is I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to think about a situation in your life where you failed. It can be as minuscule and trivial as you want, like I burned the toast this morning, or it can be as grandiose as you want it to be. And when you have that failure in your mind's eye, I want you to place it in your heart center. And then on the count of 3, we're all going to shout, I failed together, and then we're going to clap. All right? So get your failure in your mind. Don't think too much about it. And then I want you to place it in your heart center, all right? Now on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. I failed! Good. There, we all have that common. We all failed. And we're all excited for the failures that we do have because it's through our failures that we learn the areas where we need to grow. And just like Jess pointed out, it takes true courage and true bravery to examine our failures, that darkness, and to run toward it, to run through it. Not sidestep it, not run in the other direction because that seems easier, because guess what? That failure is still going to be there when you decide to come back around. It ain't going nowhere. And guess what? If you don't let that failure go, then other failures, and then they're going to be friends and multiply, and then they're going to build a gang of failures that are just going to be there to block you in your forward evolution. And sometimes when the failures become so paramount and so big, it seems impossible to tackle them. So whenever you find yourself, my brothers and sisters, in a situation where you failed, just say, I failed. Even if nobody else in the room was privy to this conversation and they're like, okay, do you want a medal? You look them in the eye and say, yes, I do want a medal. I want a medal saying I failed. There, proclaim it proudly. Do not be fearful of your failures, ladies and gentlemen, because, thank you. Thank you. I will preach. It's my favorite thing to do. So, when I started thinking about bravery, I started thinking about how true bravery, in my mind, in my interpretation of bravery, it comes about as an expression of love, as finding your truth, and then speaking that truth out loud. There ain't nothing wrong with admitting that you failed, because it might be the truth at that present moment in time. It might not always be the truth, because the truth can change. But at that moment, you're expressing your truth. Now, I went to Bernie Sanders last night, and we don't need to get into it. I know politics can be a very tricky situation, but there was something that Bernie said, actually repeatedly. Throughout his entire speech, he kept saying, "You won't hear this from other candidates. Let me tell you how it is. Let me explain it, how it really is and how it really works." And I started thinking, do we live shrouded in falsities and lies at all points in our life? Is this really the first time that this truth is being expressed publicly? And is that why people are resonating and feeling the burn and getting behind him? Because he's finally saying the truth that perhaps we hold close to our hearts but are afraid to express publicly. He brought a crowd of 4,500 people in Reno, which, my God, I was like, "Hey, Reno, you showed up. Get it." And there was a fervor in the audience. His words resonated with people because he spoke a truth that many individuals felt, but somehow feel incapable of expressing, and that broke my heart. Because I started thinking about the times in my life when I stifled my truth, when I silenced my voice because I was afraid of how I'd be perceived or how others would take it, or the ramifications and repercussions of expressing my truth. And then I started thinking about this as I went into Straight Outta Compton, which, y'all, if you got 2.5 hours of your life, that is the best freaking movie I have seen in a long time. And I am a movie reviewer. I've seen a lot of movies. So go and see it, and to see the plight of African Americans, especially African American males in Compton at the time, and how what they experienced in the mid-'80s and early '90s is still happening today, struck a chord with me, because all these men were trying to do was speak their truth, and they were vilified for it. They were beaten up for it. They were jailed for it. And then my mind went to the history of the world and started thinking about those freedom fighters who expressed their truth and what happened. There will always be people in this world, ladies and gentlemen, who will stifle your truth. And it takes exceptional bravery and strong sense of self to stand up for your truth, your capital T truth. Ain't nobody can take that away from you unless you let them. Do not let others take your truth from you. Like your divinity, your truth is your divine birthright. Your purpose on this planet is to speak your truth.
Amen. Yeah.
Woo.
Amen.
Woo. But we are paralyzed with fear and crippling self-doubt of what will happen if we express our truth. Now I want to get to the second part of the quote from the Bhagavad Gita. Man, I should have picked a different book to quote from. I always want to say Bhagavad Gita, but then it just sounds like I'm saying Inagata Davida, and then I'm just, and then it just goes to shit.
Play that song.
Thank you. And I started thinking about how those who are truly heroic, the heroes that we look to in our history as models of how we should be, approach the conflict, the fear, the hatred that can sometimes be so prevalent in our lives, not with fear and not with more hatred, but with love. And it's so profound. I have been a social justice activist for most of my life. And I used to approach the opposition with fear and hatred. Those people, those individuals with their backward beliefs. And everything changed for me when I approached the opposition with love and compassion. So while I was listening to Bernie and I was watching Straight Outta Compton, I was thinking about how these individuals reacted, what they did, the words that they used. The men in Compton used music as a way to connect communities together, to speak to the violence and prejudice that was happening in their community and incite a revolution. Now maybe they chose a little bit of a violent revolution, but it doesn't always have to be violent. People are on their personal paths and we have to compassionately understand where they are at. It is not for us to change them. That is not your job. You are not here to manipulate others. You are not here to change others. You are here to speak your truth. And by speaking your truth, you might inspire others to examine their truth. And hopefully they will go within self and decide that their truth needs a bit of editing. That's what I'm saying. And what I found so profoundly beautiful about Bernie is that he did not trash anybody in his speech. He did not talk down to anybody. He did not vilify anybody. He did not spread incredulous lies. He did not play the political game of bringing someone under in order to boost himself up. All he did was say it how it was. All he did was point out the gross atrocities that are happening in our society right now, and then he asked us to join him in making that change. So the beauty of being alchemists and why we are all here is that confronting those fears can be staggering when you think that you are on an island by yourself in a sea of isolation and in the void. But my brothers and sisters, you are not alone. Look to your left, look to your right, look behind you, look in front of you, look all around you. Everybody here answered the call of spiritual. So, random tangential point. So, Sister Act is one of Justin and my favorite movies of all time. We all seen Sister Act?
Before we moved to Reno.
Yeah, before.
Complete coincidence.
Right. The only thing I knew about Reno when I moved to Reno was Sister Act and Reno 911. That was it. But there's a scene in the film when they asked Whoopi Goldberg, Sister Mary Clarence, where were you when you got the call? Sister Mary Clarence, the call. Oh, the call. Oh, yes. I wasn't sure what call you were talking about. So because you are all here tonight, you answered that call. You answered the call because you are on your path for personal transformation. And know that you are not alone, my brothers and sisters. You are surrounded by people who love you, even if they don't know you that well. They love you. They support you. They want to see your highest good. Feed off of the collective energy of those individuals who are brave enough to stand up, seeing the injustice in this society and the world at large, and demand that part of your truth is that this is unacceptable. And that we need a change. A change is coming, ladies and gentlemen. A revolution is happening. People are waking up. Suddenly society got their big gulp of coffee and all of a sudden our eyes are open. We're seeing the things that we were afraid to look at. We're examining those boxes in the attic of our personal selves that we have let collect dust for years, afraid to open up for what we might find. We are opening those boxes and decided that we do not need those fears and we are throwing them to the curb. So my brothers and sisters, I ask of you, find your truth. Whatever that is for you today. And then once you find your truth, I want you to speak your truth. Do not be paralyzed by the fear of self-doubt that will keep you rooted in inaction. Know that your truth is probably held by others, and that if you stand up and speak your truth, others will stand up with you, and together we can bring about real change. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.